Welcome, I'm the DeadwoodJedi. There's gonna be another Raid Shadow Legends video, and we've got a very cool one for you guys, and we're gonna jump in pretty quickly here. This is brought by Short on Skills. It's a new Razzlevarg tune. The rabbit is making a reappearance, and it's very cool. Not only is it a 2-1 ratio, but it's also involving a counterattack champion. Works for Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare. Brutal can be a little bit tricky, but it does work there as well. Pretty awesome, actually, and looks like it's full auto. So I just want to give a big shout out to Hendrix for letting me get on his account and showcase this. But let's jump in and take a quick look at the team setup here. So you can see we've got Razzlevarg here. You can see the setup here for if you want to run this at full auto. We've got Corvus the Corruptor. Corvus is pretty crucial for this because of his ability to extend the duration of ally buffs, right? So he's going to be able to extend some buffs, allowing this to be full auto, making sure that we have counterattack for the full fight. That's kind of a big thing when it comes to Razzlevarg because of his passive ability on his A1 skill. We've got Geomancer in here, not only providing damage, but also some damage reduction. And then Pythion, making us affinity friendly. And very last, we have Skull Crusher. Now, this team isn't going to be for everybody necessarily, but it is pretty awesome. So let's just jump in here and watch the run, see how much damage we do. And I think it's a pretty impressive team for a traditionally built Razzlevarg squad. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one that comes out. And of course, if you enjoyed today's music, we have that link down below in the pinned comment and description of this video, and you can use code DeadwoodJedi, save yourself 15%. And of course, if you want some account work, you don't like doing the work yourself, I'm more than happy to do it for you. My team is at the beck and call. Just visit my website, DeadwoodJedi.com. Okay, so as we start, you can see obviously Corvus. I've never actually used Corvus, so it's kind of cool to see him in action, but obviously he's going to give us some poisons out there. Counterattacks from Skull Crusher should be really good here. But yeah, getting this all set up is obviously really tricky with Razzlevarg. You know, not only do we have a speed buff, which is tricky, he's got his passive ability, which makes him go faster. That's tricky. But he's got a turn meter boost on his A1. That's tricky. Oh yeah, and then we're throwing in counterattack. That's going to make it trickier. Oh yeah, and then the buff extension as well from Corvus makes it trickier still. So it's a little bit, you know, there's a lot going on in this particular team that makes us a little bit harder of a squad to predict, right? But I think we're going to be able to get some really good results. As you can see, we've got a pretty much full debuff bar here with poisons, weaken, HP burn, poison sensitivity, leech for some healing. You know, obviously the one thing that we're really missing is a decreased defense debuff on here. So yes, I do feel like you can probably improve upon this, but also I really like Corvus for this type of a team. Getting a buff extender is, I think, really helpful when you're going at a 2-1 ratio. It allows things like ally protection to be stretched out so it covers everybody, things like counterattack to be stretched out so it covers everybody, things like block debuffs to be stretched out so that you make sure you can block everything that you need to. Now, what's interesting about this one, and this is going to be a little bit unique, right? If you're using not every block debuff champion is going to work for this type of team. And this again comes down to the way that the rabbit works in a 2-1 ratio. Typically, a 2-1 ratio, right? Everybody's taking one turn. We're just extending the buffs. We're using the speed buff. But because of Razzlevarg's unique kit, right? Not only the turn meter boost on the A1, but also the increased speed over time. And the fact that Razz is going at a 3-1 ratio, even in this build, makes it a little trickier. And so what's ending up happening is that Razzlevarg takes 2 turns when everybody else is just taking their second turn go around. So if I try to, you know, place a buff, you know, before everybody takes their second turn, Razzlevarg, it's going to fall off. Everybody else only takes 1 turn, but for Razz, it's going to fall off because they're taking 2 turns instead. The point of that is that bringing in a buff extender makes it so that we can cover Razz with everything. So you'll see here, right? This is right before the stun. You're going to see we have block debuff on 3 of our champions except for Corvus. And what's going to end up happening is because of the timing, Pythion's going to be able to cleanse it. Right here, you're going to see we have counterattack on this first AoE. Everybody's going to have counterattack and ally protection because Corvus extends the duration of those buffs, allowing Razz to be covered with it. If you're familiar with these type of teams, you kind of have an understanding of what I'm talking about. But the point is that you don't necessarily need Corvus to run this. You just need that buff extender. So a Sandlash Survivor, Godseeker Neri will be effective in running this type of team. Will they be as effective as somebody like Corvus? Probably not, because he brings a lot of other stuff to the table, but it is another option for you out there. Now, the hard part, of course, is the Pythion part with it. That is very tricky, because we're not just using Pythion to block the debuff for affinity, and that is what's happening before that second AoE. We're also using Pythion to cleanse the debuff off of Corvus. Here's the interesting thing though. Everybody, as long as Razzlevarg doesn't take the stun, we're going to be perfectly fine, because we're blocking the debuff on Geo, on Pythion, and on Skullcrusher. They all have blocked debuff up. The only person that doesn't is Razzlevarg, who again, we cannot have take the stun, and Corvus, who goes after Pythion. So what happens is that after the stun, Pythion actually cleanses that stun debuff off of everybody, including Corvus, if Corvus is the one taking the stun. So it makes it work any affinity in that case, which is, I think, a pretty cool little setup, I have to say. And with the buff extension, that's kind of part of the way that that's actually being able to work out, is Corvus is extending the block and debuff ability, I believe, from Pythion. So that just works out really nicely, because without that, obviously it wouldn't cover everybody for that, the other three champions for that stun, and that would create issues for us. We need the timing of Skullcrusher to be on point. Geomancer, there's more flexibility, but we don't want that to go off. We definitely don't want Pythion to get stunned and not be able to cleanse when his turn comes up. So that's really important. There he goes. There's a stun, and Pythion's gonna go right here and cleanses it off. It's a beautiful thing. So this is a really smart team, really creative. I really like it a lot, and I think it does open up the possibilities of more traditional teams. And for a champion like Razz, who I think is going to be even better for early game accounts, that really does make a lot of more possibilities as far as trying to build your team work for us. So I'm really excited by this. I think it's a really cool, creative solution for this team. I think it really offers a lot of options. And so that's the team, that's the squad, that's what's going on here. So I'll let this run, let you guys watch. We're already doing over about a million damage per turn, which is pretty good. The question is, how many turns are we going to survive? So let's find out. $53.22 million. Not too shabby, I'd say. That's a pretty darn good result. You can see Geo and Corvus each putting up about 16, 18 million. Razz putting up another 9. Such a good damage dealer. It's really surprising. Let's try that again. Without the cough. 53.22 million is a pretty solid 2-key team, I'd say. I do like Pythion being able to revive everybody. I think that's a nice little twist to things. Now, you know, this is a pretty interesting team, right? We got good damage out of Geo, good damage out of Corvus, obviously with their passives and the, you know, the poisons, HP burn, that sort of thing. Razz putting in a good solid 10 million. What I think is really interesting about this team, there's no increased defense. There's no strengthen buff. It's all just ally protection from Skullcrusher and passive damage reduction from Pythion and Geomancer. That's all that's going on here, and Corvus, I guess, too, right? Pretty solid little squad, I would say. So really nice result. We lasted almost 50 turns, not quite. I know this team has lasted that long before. So overall, I would say really, really solid team, really good results. That's going to be a 2-key regardless of affinity. There's not much more you can ask than that. So let's take a minute and start looking at the stats of these champions, right? We've got Pythion here in some mixed sets, really. Right, we don't need the accuracy, but we have it just to make the speeds and whatever. But we do have 100% crit rate, always helpful. Pretty solid defense at 3,300, good HP, 230 speed. This defense is definitely low for what I like for Clan Boss, right? I generally like to get into that 4,000 range, especially if we don't have increased defense, which we don't here. But all that said, I mean, obviously, Pythion's one of the last champions to die, and the passive reduction of damage that Pythion gives your team is really, really valuable, and you can really see the impact here. So overall, pretty darn solid. Another thing you might note about Pythion that we don't usually see is, as far as the masteries go, we do have lasting gifts on our champion. And that's kind of an interesting thing. That's not typically something we advise for. It can throw some stuff off, but because Pythion's really only bringing 2 buffs to the table, strengthen, but only when he revives people, as well as block debuffs, and neither of those are going to affect stun targeting from the boss. And so putting lasting gifts on is not going to hurt this team. It doesn't affect the speeds that we're going at, and so that's a really good choice here for this team and makes them more useful in other content areas. And then you can see we've got Razzlevarg in here. Actually survived a pretty good time. 105 crit rate, 199 crit damage is pretty darn solid. 230 accuracy with the accuracy buff. Let's not forget that. We actually have pretty big overkill as far as the accuracy for this team, what's needed. As far as like the other stats, right? Good 3,000 defense, 36,000 HP, only 2,400 attack. So not even built that damage heavy and still able to put up a good amount of damage. War Master does a lot of work for our team here, right? War Master and Giant Slayer, I should say. And because we do have counterattack, Giant Slayer is going to be the preferred debuff, right? We get 3 attacks off our A1. So if we do that twice, that's 6 attacks. That's 6 hits in 2 attacks. And then we get single hits from the other 2 attacks, right? So that goes from 6 to 8 attacks total, 8 hits total in 4 attacks. It's a pretty even. That's really a 2-1 ratio, right? So we can take Giant Slayer, we can take War Master. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect our damage one way or the other. And then we have Corvus. I have not used Corvus ever. I was really impressed with his abilities, right? The damage reduction you get from Corvus is actually really significant for Clan Boss, especially. We've got decent crit rate, 109%, good solid crit damage at 160. Obviously, bumping those up doesn't hurt. And that 4,500 defense, that's his damage stat, so getting that high is good. 244 speed, very solid, very reasonable. You'll notice the speeds are not crazy high. Corvus is the fastest on this team. It's a pretty nice thing with Razzlevarg. This is why he's such a great champion for Clan Boss. And 36k HP. Obviously, getting increased defense would be a nice boon, not only for our team survivability, but Corvus's damage as well. But overall, pretty solid right there. Next, we have Skull Crusher. Obviously, I love the Guardian gear. I think that's a great approach. Actually, would have loved to have seen Corvus in Guardian gear too. I think that would have been a nice little help to help this team survive a little bit longer than it did. But putting that on Skull Crusher is definitely a solid approach to things. But yeah, he's doing good for us. 4,500 defense, 40,000 HP, 181 speed. Incredibly slow when it comes down to it. 99% crit rate. Just couldn't get to that 1 extra percent. But generally, this is going to be a very solid build for us here. So this is definitely positive as far as the way you want to build your champions. But using things like Guardian sets is really advantageous for helping keeping everybody alive. Provides just a little bit more ally protection. I like to spread that out, not just have it on my ally protector, so that my ally protector can have a little bit of damage reduction as well. But all the same, it seems to work really good for our squad. And then, of course, very last, we have Geomancer here. You'll see only 2,700 defense. Definitely the lowest on this team. Getting that up to 3,000 should help the survivability overall, I would imagine. But 206 speed, again, not very fast, 100% crit rate. Not a lot of attack, not a lot of crit damage. Things that we could definitely improve as we improve the gear on this account. But, it's really getting to those speeds that we need. You will notice only 160 accuracy, 159 actually. With the increased accuracy buff from Razzlevarg, that gets us to about 240 accuracy, which is all we need. And that's the thing. For Ultra Nightmare, you're trying to be between 230 and 250 accuracy. You include the 50% accuracy bump you get from Razz, then all of a sudden you're saying I only really need about 160 accuracy to get the results I really want. So that's a pretty low bar to get to, and it makes gearing things a lot easier. So this is another fun Razzlevar tune. I'll have it on the website for you guys, and I'll try to link that down below in the pinned comment description as soon as that's updated. But this is a great option as far as building a traditional team. Now, it does need counterattack to work like it does here, right? If you're not going to use counterattack, you can use the same build we have already with the what do you, Razzle Dazzle teams, one of those teams, right? That we've already displayed and I've already shown. But if you're going to use counterattack, you're going to need to use the change speeds and alterations that we show here. It's just the way it has to work, unfortunately. It also becomes a little tricky as far as trying to stay affinity friendly, right? Having that block debuff champion along with the cleanse, that's going to be really crucial, and timing those out can be a little bit tricky. So those are things that you're going to have to deal with. Having like a Pythion is going to be, I think, pretty vital. You know, someone that can both cleanse a debuff as well as put up block debuffs is really valuable. I think somebody like a Brogni can work in this situation as well. He does have a buff removal, I think, that can work for the stun, just like we're doing here with Pythion. And so that's definitely an option for you guys. So there are other champions I know out there that can work with this, but it is about lining up those skills, timing them out so that everything works exactly the way you want it to. But what I thought was really interesting about this team, no increased defense, no strength, and we lasted a long time because of all the passive damage reduction from Pythion to Corvus to Geomancer. They all have abilities that reduce the damage that we're taking as a team, and nobody had over 30. I mean, really, like, I guess a few people had pretty high defense, but generally the defense levels across the board were fairly low, considering that we didn't have those buffs. So I thought that was a pretty cool little nifty little showcase of how, you know, passive damage reduction works. I think YST would be very proud of this team. But big thanks to Short on Skills for taking the time to put this together in the calculator, and big thanks to Hendrik, obviously, for letting me get on the accounts and showcases. So that's all we got for today, guys. Do not forget, if you like the music, we got that SoundStripe link down below. We've got, you know, I don't know, guys. Hit the subscribe button, follow my stuff. I love you all. Thank you so much for sticking around. Until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.